So I'm Jeff Allen. I am the CEO of OuterBox. You are very lucky that you're not going to hear very much from me today. My job is to kind of keep us on track and keep us moving and field the questions as we go. But the people who will be doing most of the talking today are Jordan Sen. She is Director of Integrated Marketing here. Say hello, Jordan.
Hey, guys.
Do a mic check. Jordan's amazing. She has a wealth of experience in business and marketing strategy and has a ton in B2B specifically. So you'll probably hear a bit more on that front from her. And then we have Craig Smith. He's our Chief Strategy Officer. Say hi, Craig.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Craig is incredibly well-versed in the digital marketing landscape. He talks to a lot of our clients every day about these things and how they can impact him. So he spends a lot of his brain space thinking exactly about these trends. As far as the agenda today, we really have broken this into three distinct parts. The first is performance trends and kind of the market overview. We then want to talk about where you're going to find growth based on that information, where we think growth can come from. And then, of course, we're all trying to run a business here. It's not just about growth. It's also about being more efficient and effective. So we'll end talking about where we think that efficiencies will come over the next year.
So I'm going to talk about some things that we're seeing in the industry, some data points and trends that kind of provide a theme to today in terms of some things that you should have on your radar of areas to plan for. I'm going to start out with industry digital consumption. This was a data point that I found in doing research and preparing for this webinar that I thought was very interesting. It's coming from a report called the Digital Experience Benchmark Report, which essentially looks at page views and sessions and time on site in certain categories. And it helps us in understanding what categories are doing well, what categories are seeing weakness to some degree. Very interesting for us was the 12% growth in consumption within the manufacturing sector. A lot of OuterBox's customers are in B2B manufacturing and industrial, and we thought that was very interesting that only second to software was the growth year over year. Also interesting was a little bit of softness in the retail category. We're seeing almost a 6% reduction in consumption. So year over year, there's been some degradation in the amount of content and the amount of page views and time spent on retailer websites. Now, moving on into conversion rates. Now, this is also reinforcing that theme of the manufacturing category, seeing some growth. You can see that manufacturing was one of the few industry segments that saw an increase to conversion rate year over year. Again, coming from the benchmark report, coming from a 1.61 to 1.72. While a lot of the other categories had degradation, you can see overall going from 2.7 to 2.6, and in some of the other categories, which I won't reference, retail again with some softness going from 2.7 to 2.5. That could be somewhat driven from the catalyst of, still that post-COVID tailwinds dying off, but thought it was very interesting seeing that manufacturing had that growth. So good news. Device engagement. This is another topical area from a standpoint of digital marketing that we wanted to keep an eye on and see how the trends were shaking out. To no surprise, desktop still shows significant strength in engagement. So what you're seeing here on the left is essentially categories and industries showing the time spent per session by industry and device. And you can see in most categories, we're getting 2 to 3, sometimes even 4x the amount of engagement in a specific session as it relates to mobile versus desktop. To no surprise, industrial sites, a key category for us, 80% of our clients are seeing desktop sessions lead mobile. But Jordan, do you want to give some perspective on how your team and how our business in general looks at mobile and desktop from a standpoint of servicing both B2B and B2C clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like the stat says here, 80% of our traffic is coming from desktop specifically and mainly on that B2B side of things. However, what's really interesting is that's also translating to the conversion side. So really for our industrial clients and that perspective and those industry verticals, like we're leaning a lot into what that desktop experience is. Google does base everything off of mobile first, so we don't want to ignore that. So the content must be present, the experience must be great, time of load on site is so critical for both B2B and B2C. So this is all really great data for us. And we have to center ourselves on that balance between desktop and mobile and knowing where those conversions are based on your industry vertical.
Yeah, that's a really great point that you mentioned about Google's algorithm and the mobile first indexing. So even if 5% of your traffic is coming from mobile and desktop is your extreme focus, which is warranted, it's still, you have to have a mobile experience, to Jordan's point, that's fast, that's intuitive, that's easy to navigate, because Google's going to predicate your algorithmic score in organic search from that experience. Moving on to traffic share by channel. So this is showing new visitor traffic share by marketing channel and what was the bellwethers. And interestingly, the search channel is still serving as the linchpin for creating new customers online. You can see that year over year, we have a 27.6 growth or number for paid search, 27.1 in organic. Both went up year over year. Unlike the direct channel that went down, as well as some other channels also went down. Email was flat. When it came to, we did an analysis to look at kind of our overall base of customers and how much of their traffic is coming from organic search. That data point came out to be 44%. And I know, Jordan, you did some of the analysis associated to that. You kind of want to talk about your thoughts on penetration in organic and paid within our category?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to be a continued focus for us as it relates to a holistic investment from all of our clients, regardless of the industry here. If we actually go to that next slide, we're going to really center ourselves on what that opportunity is from a foundation and a methodology standpoint. So much of us are or do have a finite amount of budget that we're giving to the marketing dollars, especially as we move into either 2025. Crazy, the year's already over. But we have a process and an approach that we reference as the Be Smart method. So this is really focused on driving industry and intent specific queries. So, again, we're considerate, right? We are finite. We have got limited budget. We can't spend an unlimited amount of dollars on all of our different touch points as it relates to marketing opportunities. And so this Be Smart content, this Be Smart methodology is really centered on driving that intent. So what is the difference between someone searching stainless steel versus 17.4 pH round bar, right? We know that those people that add a shape or a size or a SKU or material, or even an area, those users are much further down like that funnel and that transaction journey. And so what we can see here is just understanding with those landscapes that matter for our clients and ensuring that we have an approach and a strategy to help us show up here. This is a client on our side that really leans into those Be Smart modifiers. So they are an air filter manufacturing company. So the query that we see at the bottom is a 24 by 48 Astrocell HEPA filter. So we can see a size modifier, we can see a brand modifier, we can see a requirement. And the idea is like when searchers do search in this way, that intent is unlike anything else. And that's really where we want to make sure that you guys, or our clients in general, are showing up and making sure that content actually matches that. Because if we don't have that content on our site, we can't support those queries, and it makes it a lot more difficult to be in the spaces when users do have that need.
Yeah. And here's regarding that content approach and that drilling down to the specifications of a SKU. Talk a little bit about Rapid Rivet and what did we learn here and what did it drive?
Yeah, so this was a fantastic example for us. So Rapid Rivets and Fastener Corp, they came to us late last year. We were really thin as it relates to content, specifically content that mimicked and followed that Be Smart methodology. So application, rivet type, material type, all of those were lacking. And so it made it very difficult in the very beginning for this client to show up for those specific searches. And with a heavy investment and a heavy focus on that content creation, I mean, the results speak for themselves here. We've seen a 216% increase in overall web traffic, 155% increase in site conversions. And what that translates to at the end of the day is 54 new business opportunities. And for us on the B2B side in the industrial space, like those are huge opportunities with a high dollar amount associated with it. And so when we think about lead gen versus e-commerce, conversions are what matter. And that's where we want to center ourselves as it relates to success.
Mm-hmm. And then another example of content production in B2C is our work with Land's End. We've done a lot of multifaceted SEO work with Land's End, both on the technical side, fixing issues regarding content and interlinking and subcategory and category content to improve the indexation of the business. It really has been a phenomenal relationship, and we've driven 47% increase to revenue year over year and a 66% increase to keyword placements. Also, we want to talk about is budget allocations. We have the B2B category with the B2C category. We serve both at OuterBox. But what I thought was really interesting when I was into some of the research, and in this report was from the Salesforce State of Marketing, it talked about the allocation of B2B and B2C marketers and their budgets. And you can see here, they kind of play in the same sandbox. These are somewhat uniform in terms of the percentage of the budget going to advertising, going to people, going to content. So this will be a good, when you get the slides, after the webinar, this might be good to go back, look at your own budget and kind of compare and contrast. How does it look to the marketplace?
Yeah.
Talking about
sorry, Craig, even if we wanted to add, while it has both advertising on both of those budgets, it's how you and where you invest in the advertising that can really customize that strategy and that approach for both B2C and B2B. So really wanted to call that out as we go into this next slide of customer journey and where we fall as it relates to the pre and post conversion.
Yeah, I think it's a great segue. Why don't you talk a little bit about this customer journey, specifically in B2B, and how the search marketing falls in this landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting, and this is a data point really taken from our customer database, is that we've actually found that basically 57% of prospects are on the way. 57% of prospects are of the way through the buying process before they actually contact you. So where and why that's important is because we think about our own purchasing habits and our own research. And so what you can see here is that some of those touch points are really going to lend itself as to areas that we have to show up in. So not only the keyword search as it relates to paid and SEO, but the idea of looking at local listings and what the user experience is, and the opportunity for social and how that integrates into your cohesive strategy. And so all of these are touch points that either we can have that conversation with as it relates to your marketing team here, or we can talk about where it makes sense for you to invest your dollars to help, again, expand your presence in these touch points that matter. But what is super important for us is also not turning our head to what happens after that conversion. So, once they actually fill out a form, 43% of the customers still are considering other areas, right? So response time matters, lead time matters, customer service matters. And so again, utilizing our analytics tools such as Loop or CallRail to understand how those touch points are playing into that conversion path, and ultimately aiding in y'all's ability to convert those into actual transactions or opportunities is a huge opportunity for us going forward.
And maybe somewhat more in B2C, but also B2B, we need to target all phases of what we call the customer journey. And this is kind of a good flow diagram saying, okay, there's awareness, interest, consideration, intent, evaluation, and purchase. And there's going to be different types of queries at different stages. And in B2C, there's some examples here, like a commerce search of hockey goal, right? That's very simple to the point. We know what they want. Then there's problem solving. Youth soccer cleats size 2, no laces. Okay, so now you're much more precise. And this is where your data feed can be much more important. Your content can be much more important in terms of creating more semantics into your website that are going to trigger the long tail conversions. And then there's also the lower funnel, where we call them performance. And this is where someone's looking for something that's branded. They've already been exposed to the Nike backpack through their research, but now they're going back to look for it specifically. You got to make sure that all those different types of search queries are incorporated into your campaigns. And that's going to allow you to target all these different phases. Okay, next. Now let's talk about where.
Greg, sorry, we got a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, please.
So I really appreciate that so far. The question is, so there was a slide that showed the share of market by the different channels, and it showed how search, both paid and organic, dominates where traffic's coming from. But obviously AI is now on the scene, and there's, search engines being released just kind of through ChatGPT and all of that. And the questions, are we seeing it all that starting to cannibalize any of Google or Microsoft's market share in the space, or is that seemingly additive to what folks have historically done? Do we have a view on that?
I would say we have not seen significant degradation in session traffic since ChatGPT came to market. We've definitely seen referral traffic coming from links included in some of these tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT, obviously. But we also have yet to see the search engine. It is in beta. and they're going to be rolling it out. ChatGPT search is right now going to a very, very small subset of users. You can join the wait list if you want to go and give your email address. When that comes out, I think it's going to be a little bit different because now you're going to get much more advertising around, hey, search on ChatGPT. And also, there's been a lot of changes in the way that Google's rendering their artificial intelligence blurbs at the top of a search page. I actually read this morning that now they're incorporating hyperlinks, the blue links to a URL in the paragraph of text itself. So I think it's TBD to some degree, but I do think the landscape's going to change dramatically once this ChatGPT search engine actually comes out to the market. But Jordan, what do you think?
I would agree. I think one of the things that we don't want to lose sight of is that all of these chatbots are powered by either Google Bing or Bing's index. And so our traditional optimization methodologies and approaches, like really right now, are not changing. If anything, it does make us look at really how we're answering some of these more specific queries, which is where we're really seeing those AI overviews like pop up. But for the most part, like we still are going to need a page to be competitive. We're still going to have the top end content. We're still going to need to make sure that we're addressing different variations. So from a strategy standpoint, I really don't think we deviate too far from what we currently are. I think just how it looks is going to be a little bit different and where people might go. So.
Yeah. And it's also the intent of the query. I think where AI comes into play is when there is a query that's asking a question. That's when, large language models, ChatGPT, et cetera, really shine. If someone's just searching for a product specific, like to your earlier Be Smart example of the real spec-driven industrial query, I mean, what's ChatGPT going to really add a value to that when you just want to find that product? So the landscape's always changing. It's going to be obviously interesting moving forward. But as far as is now, I'm not seeing tremendous loss of Google traffic.
Yeah, I think it's really important also for us to call out that right now, on average, AI overviews are really only showing up between 5 and 7% of searches done. And there's over 5 billion searches done a day. So if we really put that in perspective, it's a very, very small percentage of the landscape that's actually experiencing this. And for our specifically really for our e-commerce and our B2B and our industrial sites, like we're not really seeing that overlap right now. Can that change in the future? 100%. But in this current moment, it's a pretty small subsect, if not really showing up at all.
Well, great. Well, I know we have quite a bit on AI kind of to round things out at the end, but super helpful. Appreciate that. Back to you, Craig.
All right. So let's talk about growth. Where are brands finding growth? This is actually coming from the Salesforce Data Marketing Report again, so a big, broad base of respondents in both B2C and B2B. I thought it was interesting that 90% of these respondents all used email, ads, and social. Right, you can see them over here. They're predominant. What I thought was very surprising was that only 56% of the respondents stated that organic search was a quote unquote marketing channel that they were utilizing in their efforts. Now, as a piggyback to that, HubSpot had some really interesting data on what channel has equaled the biggest ROI. This came out, and again, the State of Marketing in HubSpot 2024. And SEO came in top of the list. 16% of respondents stated as SEO had the highest ROI, which I find really interesting. So less people using it, but it's showing a high ROI. That usually would then indicate, in my mind, a good opportunity for folks who aren't being proactive in that piece of the puzzle. Jordan, any thoughts on these data points?
No, I mean, I totally agree with this. I think one of the biggest things for us to consider here is not losing sight of a last click data attribution versus a data driven one or a multi-channel, meaning that our channels are often working together. And so a lot of our different programs, like on the social media, paid social media content, like that purpose or those campaign goals might be very different than what our SEO goals are, but we're still working towards that general funnel, and they fall on different points. And so, again, for those of us that do have a finite amount of budget, it's going to be really important for us to have those conversations as it relates to, okay, what makes sense for our bottom line? If we're focused on really driving those conversions, that revenue, those transactions, then maybe the SEO side of things makes a lot more sense. But at the same time, and I realize this might sound contradictory, it's understanding where our audiences are. And so I think we'll get into that here a little bit more. But I think those are great call outs from a data point standpoint.
All right. Also, really interesting in some of our research, and this came from Shopify, was the proliferation of social media in all of the internet. So today, there's 5.7 or 5.07 billion internet users. It's calculated that out of that, 4.74 billion social media users. So social is a place, even though it's not predominant in B2B as a marketing strategy, it's something that needs to be considered when you look at the sheer volume of users who are on there each and every day. Social media ad spending is also gaining a lot of momentum. Shopify is estimating that social ad spending will grow 60% by 2028 to 262 billion. So it might not be top of mind today, but in both B2C and to some degree in different types of use cases in B2B, social ads should have a seat at the table when it comes to a budget allocation. Jordan, how are some of your clients utilizing social in their strategies? And I know we're going to talk about a little bit on the careers pathing component in a couple slides, but maybe you can talk a little bit at a high level of how folks that you work with are using social.
Absolutely. I'd say like especially, and I'm going to lean more into that B2B side of things, like you referenced, Craig. For us, it's maybe like, honestly, like LinkedIn's going to be that primary platform that we're going to talk through as it relates to just where our customers are and what the goals are. But I would say just examples of how we're using social media or how we're trying to connect with those clients and those prospects on those different platforms could be through white paper downloads, conferences, again, with the emergence or re-emergence of trade shows. I know, Craig, you've been to a handful just this year alone, making sure that we're bringing in the right audience. So event-related marketing is obviously huge on the social side, depending on if they're an attendee or if they're trying to get foot traffic there. So I think those are some of the big ones. We're going to talk through automation pieces, and again, like that can contribute to the audience creation. So we can get to that towards the end of this.
Yeah. And then social commerce for those in B2C, even a faster growth rate. You can see that this year it's estimated from Shopify to be 1.7 billion, with a 2.9 billion in social commerce sales happening by 2026. That's a staggering 71%. So if you are in B2C, you definitely got to look at Instagram stores, TikTok stores. How can you leverage Facebook? Perhaps even Reddit, other types of channels to get your products in front of people where they're digesting content and interacting and engaging with the creators that they admire. All right, so back to social. This was also really interesting coming from HubSpot. Short form video. 56% of marketers using TikTok have stated they're going to increase their investment next year. And 30% of marketers who don't use short form video are planning on starting this year. So the reason this is important, it is a medium that shows authenticity. It shows you being genuine. It doesn't need to be fancy, but even just having some presence in short form video to support your brand mission or to show your people is a great way to be diverse from a marketing perspective. And I think we have a good example of that. Jordan, you want to talk through this? I know this is an example identified.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got two here from two of our industrial clients on just like the hiring piece and also the trade show attendance ones, which both of these we referenced earlier. I think all of our teams right now, it's not a uncommon narrative that team member retention is a challenge that we're facing, especially post-COVID, regardless of the industry that we're actually in. And so leveraging this is specifically on LinkedIn to help attract like that next generation, to help appeal as to why to work for either of these companies, I think is incredibly critical. Craig, on that previous slide, we don't need to go back to it, but one of the most important pieces that we want to call out here is that the audience has to make sense. So for those B2B and industrial companies and clients that are on this webinar today, like please don't hear this and say, hey, you guys need to go create a TikTok because you don't have that. It's very important to understand what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to connect with, and what you're trying to drive as it relates to your social efforts. One of the things that did just pop in my head is also incorporating YouTube advertising for some of these short-term videos and making sure that we're showing up wherever we can. It's a pretty low cost, but again, like it plays right into that style of video creation and creative that you referenced here from the report.
Jordan, there's a question that came through that's really relevant to this slide. So you mentioned if you're in, so LinkedIn for B2B tends to make a lot of sense, whether it's for recruiting or, trying to talk to the specific, people in the specific roles that are your buyers or your influencers. But you mentioned you don't need to go run out and start a TikTok necessarily, but maybe talk through a little bit, what would be the use cases? Does it ever make sense in a B2B space to do that, or maybe even to use influencers in that space? And like, how would you think about, if it makes sense for you?
Yeah. Honestly, really, really great questions to consider. There's going to be a lot of reports out there that can help us address and understand who that target market is from an age perspective and what you're trying to gain from demographics. I think about how my own personal consumption on these, and if I were to be buying something like, would I expect a large ticketed item such as a B2B product or something that's manufactured by one of our clients? I don't think that it makes sense on like, hey, I'm going to go find a crane on TikTok and hope that it matches, especially if I'm looking specifically for like a 5-ton jib crane. You're like, this is not going to be in my For You page. So I think general considerations is like, okay, if you're working towards the hiring goal, okay, it's like, who are you trying to bring on? What are those roles? What are those interests? Are you trying to convey a great work culture, or are you trying to talk about those benefits? I would say like those are probably going to be your biggest ones, but for the most part, some of our other B2B ideas are probably going to be closer towards the ones that straddle like the B2C. We've got a handful of like pool builders, and like honestly, from a design standpoint, like that is a terrific platform to be talking through, right? Like everyone is very aesthetically motivated. They know what they want from a shape perspective or from a features perspective. But again, like that product is just a very different product than what a lot of our industrial clients are.
Yeah. So the answer is kind of, it depends, but know your
Yeah.
audience, know obviously the market for, but also who is going to be the decision maker and where, if it's going to be
Right.
very expensive product, it's probably going to be a decision made at a very senior level of a business. And that might fall into a demographic that doesn't spend a lot of time on TikTok. But for some other items, it might. I would also maybe think about it in terms of like, no one has endless marketing budgets, but if you're spending some amount on branding and brand awareness, then it might make sense to actually get in on some of those plays on a crane, for example, because just like anything, just like where we run TV ads or, broader branding ads, it's a little bit about brand recognition. And if you want to kind of build for the future, you want to make sure that those folks maybe earlier in their career that are moving up to start associating your brand to their problems and to the solutions that you have. So, not every business has the money or the patience to invest in those kind of efforts, but certainly is a bit of a case to be made for that.
Yeah, I think some of our favorite ones are, we joke about it and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but like for our industrial fabrication clients that are here on this call, like we were laughing about having like some ASMR videos of TIG welding and like just like the beautiful welds that their team is producing, because again, it's very much aesthetically driven. And so, like long term, will that generate new conversions or new opportunities? Probably not. Is it entertaining content that can help build brand awareness? 100%.
Makes sense.
Great perspective, guys. Thank you for that. All right, next, talking about SMS as a marketing channel. I thought this was very interesting when we looked at the market and we were looking at email trending. And you can see in Q4 of 2023, we saw this spike in SMS growth, and it continued into Q1. So this really is more around, in my opinion, commerce-centric businesses, B2C and B2B, but you can do it in other areas like prospecting, order details, maybe loyalty efforts with your current customers, standard communications. I would definitely say to look at the touch points and your current journey within your customers and prospects and try to think, does it make sense to weave in text messaging? Obviously, from a transactional standpoint, hey, your order has shipped or your order has been received, whatever it may be, but also from a standpoint of building brand awareness and informing when there might be events or things that are newsworthy.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out, especially, B2B. On the B2B side, it's something that we might not have historically really talked about from legacy TopSpot clients, but the opportunity here is really huge, because like if I think about The air filters example that we had at the very beginning of this, they have a historical uptick around the time change and around really the just fall in general. About when clocks fall back, they need to change their air filters. And so thinking about how this could integrate with that strategy, it's like, hey, don't forget the clocks are changing back. Have you changed your air filters? And so again, thinking about your industry, the value of a lifetime customer, knowing that a majority of these in the B2B space are recurring opportunities and recurring long lasting partnerships. This could be a really great addition to think through.
Now let's talk about personalization. And this has been an area that has gained a lot of momentum in recent years. And there's definitely benefits to deploying personalization efforts within your business. You don't have to go down to one-to-one personalization where you're recommending a specific product to a specific person, but really you can look at what I would call audience personalization or cohort personalization based upon industry affinity, based upon session type, et cetera. But some data points from this: 80% of businesses surveyed by Twilio said that customers spend more, 34% more on average, when their experience online is personalized. And on the flip side, consumers, nearly half of them, 49%, said they would be a repeat buyer after getting a personalized experience from a brand. And just some areas of personalization to consider within your businesses. Number one, supporting content. So if you know someone has an affinity to a certain product or category or segment in your business based upon, let's say, what they've shown in previous sessions, well, let's speak to them. Let's make a homepage or a banner or a content opt-in box. It's an overlay that's going to be tailored to what they've already shown the propensity for. Some other things here, customer retention content for existing customers, like loyalty programs, personalized emails, personalized web pages is kind of what I just talked about, in-app experiences, dynamic content, and then onboarding. All these are both B2C and B2B aspects for personalization. But I think the big one in my mind is being able to identify behavior, think through what type of content, offers, et cetera, maps to that behavior, and then making your site intelligent enough so that on a repeat session or maybe within a retargeting ad, you're speaking to that segment and their distinct needs. Jordan, any comments on this one?
No, I mean, I entirely agree, which I don't think should come as a surprise. The example that really comes to mind here is especially like with our clients that work in the aerospace and defense sector, and the supporting content, right? It's thinking about what's on our aerospace page. If someone's coming in for a nickel-based alloy or a high-temp plastic, like we know probably what those common applications are going to be if it is in the aerospace and defense. Like, are we talking about DFARS? Are we talking about ASTM standards? Are we really leaning into what makes this special and why someone should work with them, and connecting the dots as it relates to industry, to product, to application, to standards and requirements here. So this is really what comes to mind as it relates to personalization, and then taking that to scale on every page and type of page that you have on your website. So I love the content call out specifically.
Yeah. Geographic targeting is another great avenue. So if your business serves a global audience and global customers, we've had tremendous success in making unique homepages and messaging tailored to a continent or country. For example, we have a client in the horse supplies category who serves a large geographic base overseas in the United Kingdom, for example. 20% of the traffic coming to their site was from the UK, but there was no messaging around, hey, we ship to the UK. We were able to create a experience that's tailored for a United Kingdom session, which drove conversion in that cohort up. I think it was like 30% or so. That's the kind of approaches that we're talking about. Thinking through your audience, thinking through their segments, and delivering content that's going to be unique to them. Okay, so
before we move on from personalization, a question that came up. So it makes sense, the need to do it and the kind of the why. But I think the question is, how difficult is it? And I know this is near and dear to your heart, Craig. So maybe you can talk us a little bit, like how difficult / expensive is a personalization effort.
So I'll say there's two types of personalization. There's what we call algorithmic personalization. This is mainly in e-commerce, where large subsets of data are looked into to say, hey, you may also like, right? That's kind of like the generic e-commerce. Everyone does it. You may also like, and it's based on your click stream, and it's based upon your previous purchases. There's also other ways to do it, like Other people who have looked at this product also have looked at this product. A little bit easier to do. Probably in B2B, like the geo-targeting example, it's not difficult to do at all because in that case, you're using a tool. What we use at OuterBox is convert.com. Convert.com powers our A/B testing. It powers our multivariate testing efforts, and it also powers our targeting efforts. I would call this targeting. We're targeting a cohort. A cohort might be someone is new to our site and has never been here before. That's a cohort. What are we going to target them with? Maybe it's a homepage. It speaks differently than someone who's already a customer. Or someone's come to the site, they went to a certain category and they showed actions by clicking 5 of the turbine engines. Okay, we now can bucket them as a turbine prospect. What are we going to show them when they come back a second time? All of that's done, not using an algorithm, but using business rules and clickstream data that's captured by the script. So it's actually not expensive to run. And we're going to have some examples of how you can use it in a little bit, but it's all about thinking through the audience segments. How do you want to speak to them differently? And then mocking up how you want to trigger and render on the website presentation. Okay, so rounding out the growth section, customer experience is a huge area of concern for each and every customer in OuterBox. Here are 5 of the most prominent acquisition strategies that brands are using from the Shopify Trends Report. So this is probably geared obviously more towards B2C e-commerce, maybe not as relevant to B2B, but here are some of the things in B2C e-commerce you want to consider. Social channels for marketing promotions, we talked about that. Premium products and services, having that upper tier. I've seen this a lot in different categories. Using e-commerce marketplaces, that might be some fertile ground. More payment methods, putting more payment methods like Apple Pay, that's really can drive a little bit of conversion by using Apple Pay, using PayPal, using Venmo to take orders. And then lastly, and going back to personalization, using customer data for better targeting. And that's where, again, that segmentation strategy comes into play. As customer experience efforts, we're in them every day. It usually corresponds to, when it comes to the website, a experience design effort where we look at the data and we can see how a certain template's performing. Let's say it's a product page on a industrial e-commerce site, and we know that product page is less than what we would call excellent in its progression to the cart. In that instance, we would take an approach of really doing one of 3 things. We would make a change and implement it. We would do an A/B test, or we would do multiple A/B tests. And this is a great way for your business to be proactive in terms of testing and learning, trying to be agile in the experiences and messaging you're relaying to the audience you're serving to drive growth. And a great example of this is Buy Auto Parts. And when we worked with them, you can see on the left their initial version of their website experience. And their goal was to get people to the make and model. Well, we took a step back and we said, hey, this isn't the ideal presentation. We used the aforementioned tool, Convert, to re-engineer the experience and test a different type of presentation that's going to make it easier for people to get their vehicle assortment. This drove a 7% decrease to bounce rate and a 50% increase to homepage conversion in the first 6 months. So a real big win, taking into account that kind of methodology of data into new designs, into tests, and then into the deployment. Now, we talked about the customer journey. We're going to show 2 slides. First is this is like the B2C customer journey. When it comes to automation, when it comes to email, when it comes to personalizing email, these are what I call table stakes. These are things you must have. You need to have a welcome series. You need to have browse abandonment, recommendations, cart abandonment, review requests, upsell, cross-sell, VIPs, win-backs, etc. And then you layer on these advanced segments on top of it. A welcome series for someone who bought a basketball hoop, a welcome series for someone who bought kids' jeans, whatever it may be. You can segment them to your audiences. So this is a great approach for anyone who's in the B2C market to look at your current automation footprint and see what you're doing in these areas and make sure that you're covering all your bases when it comes to B2C customer experience. Now let's go to B2B, and Jordan, I'll let you talk through this a little bit. Like, what are some of the touch points in B2B, and how can our audience use automation, use email to better speak to their prospects and customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is huge. Like knowing how long our lead cycles really are naturally on the B2B and industrial side, I think automation is a no-brainer for a lot of us, and then we have a huge opportunity to incorporate it into our marketing strategies for 2025. Some of those opportunities here could be segmented by industry. If they're looking at the industry page, again, I'm going to use that aerospace example. That need is going to be very different than someone that is coming in for a medical industry or medical application. Again, different materials, different requirements, different types there. So that's going to be an opportunity for us. We know that people will make it to our forms. Again, a majority of our B2B sites are lead gen. So they're filling out those RFQs, those RFPs, the request information. So are they abandoning on a certain field? And can we at least create that audience based on those? We've got two different opportunities to segment that: those that have approached and started the field or and abandoned it, and then those that have actually converted, right? So that touch point comes into play, right? We saw that 47% or 43% like still happens post conversion. And this is a great opportunity here for us. So, we see other examples, again, segmenting by industry, newer returning customers, industry by product. Again, a lot of our customers that we're driving in theory are returning buyers. And so if we can lean into that, this is where automation can really help elevate the return on really just the lifetime customer value for our B2B side.
Yeah, I was in a meeting with a B2B marketing leader about a month ago. And in discussions, we talked about their physical sales team and the amount of volume that they weren't able to keep up with in terms of inbound lead flow and follow-ups and quotes. And what we were finding was that after one or two touch points, those folks weren't getting hit again. And that's not ideal. What we're going to build for these folks is an automated email system. So it's based upon business rules and synchronizes with their CRM so that those folks who maybe did not respond to the salesperson's outreach is going to get into a drip campaign and quote follow-up for the next 2 to 3 months. So definitely a great way to augment your internal sales team efforts with automation and technology to make them more efficient. Okay, and speaking of efficiency, as we round out webinar,
really quick, I'm going to interrupt you again because we got a question, if that's all right.
You got it.
This one came in a bit ago, but we showed the slide where traffic split between mobile and desktop, and the question came in, where should we prioritize with SEO? And it's a little bit of mobile versus desktop, but also within mobile, what about voice? So if you think back to a few years ago, it was all about voice, and how impactful that was going to be kind of pre-Gen AI, and now we have ChatGPT to talk about. What are your all's thoughts on which one do you prioritize, mobile versus desktop, and talk to a voice a little bit in there, and then maybe even add some context around, do you think there's really a meaningful difference on how you optimize for those different search methods?
Yeah, so I would say you should be on a responsive design so that any change you would make in mobile also resolves on desktop. That's both in your content, it's in your metadata, it's in your header tags. Any tag you would incorporate into the desktop version theoretically should be on the mobile version. That being said, speed on mobile is where I would really look. Your core web vitals, your CLS data, which is the layout shift, how fast assets load, your image sizes, et cetera. All of that, even if mobile is a small subset of traffic, that's going to have the algorithmic benefits. So I don't think it's one or the other. I'd really dial in your mobile speed and just create great content that is going to render on both mobile and desktop if you have a responsive design. Now, if you don't have a responsive design, which I think is in this day and age pretty rare, what that means is you have an m.yourdomain.com and it's essentially two different sites in the eyes of Google, then yes, then you have to think through, where am I publishing this? And my answer would be both the mobile and the desktop, but I don't see that too often. Jordan, what are your thoughts?
No, I would agree. I think the biggest benefit from a mobile consideration will be that speed and experience. Now, I think where we get really technical, and I think one of the biggest benefits of working with a partner like OuterBox is having the ability to see that data and test this data. So, Google's stance on accordion content, right? Technically, it is welcome. But in reality, sometimes that content might not be valued as highly as that content that's actually showing up on page, which you would by default see that on desktop. And so this is a great opportunity for our teams to test and measure and hey, if it makes sense, sometimes you might have to actually remove that accordion or make it to where it auto opens so that that value is actually seen for the content that was previously hidden on a mobile device. So really testing and measuring, I'd say, but I agree at the end of the day, like you're prioritizing both. So they kind of go hand in hand, long story short.
Makes perfect sense. And really quick, any thoughts on voice specifically? Is voice still a priority, or is it just kind of the same story as it gets caught up in the rest of those optimizations that you've talked about?
I believe voice is a much greater priority when there's a local element, because near me searches are really what's one of the more prominent, like, hey, pizza shop near me, or auto dealer near me, whatever it may be. If you have a local element where there's a near me component, I think it becomes very important. But we're not seeing at least I don't talk to many folks who really have voice search as a prominent pillar in their SEO strategy. It's more around questions. I think I would look at questions. And one of my favorite tools is a tool called Answer the Public. You can actually go there, type in a query, see all the questions that people search, all the prepositions that people search related to that phrase. I would look at questions and trying to gain topical relevance in your market versus thinking about voice search.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the couple stats, though, that are important for us to always keep top of mind is that 15% of searches done every day have never been searched before. So the way the nuances of someone doing voice search is going to be very similar to how someone might type into Google. I know between the three of us that are on this webinar, like I guarantee the way that we find a pair of shoes is going to look very different depending on what our needs are, what our brand preferences are, everything like that. So it just comes naturally with how we focus on intent-based searches. So I wouldn't necessarily segment it into a totally different vertical or a totally different consideration. The same thing goes with AI. I think they're going to be hand in hand, but understanding that there's not one keyword phrase that your entire customer base searches for. It's a multitude of variations with specific modifiers there that are going to lend itself to intent or the actual conversion aspect of it all. Like, I think that's the most important piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sense.
So, what we want to do here as it relates to efficiency is really lean into this report as it relates to the MarTech and the marketing tools and technologies that we're seeing both B2B and B2C marketers incorporate. And so far and away, we've got 88% of this audience actually answers and utilizes marketing analytics and measurement tools. So for those of us that are current OuterBox clients on this call, we're leaning into Loop Analytics, we're leaning into Google Analytics, we're leaning into our SEO tools that our team utilizes from a day-to-day basis. This is absolutely critical, right? Understanding that quality of conversion, the lead qualification component here really lends itself to this particular element. What we can see as it relates to the rest of that MarTech stack, CRMs, advertising platforms, mobile marketing, marketing automation, email, CMSs, personalization engines, account-based marketing platforms. And so one thing that we just wanted to broadly ask, like as we go into 2025, what are you using? How do you fall into these percentages? Is there an opportunity to expand your marketing tech stack to incorporate more of this? Again, budget allowing for it. Like no one's made up of money, but this is really important for us to see. And maybe this is an opportunity for expansion in 2025. But Craig, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, the big one for me is marketing automation and journey management. I think from everyone on this call, that's probably where their greatest opportunity is if they're not leveraging it. Creating those train tracks of automations relating to segments, relating to scenarios in your business that's going to be always running without any human being driving that. So some of these other ones that Salesforce called out, customer data platform, very important, but not nearly as important in B2B as B2C. Personalization engine, pretty much the same thing. So kind of a mixed bag here, but the journey management, the automation is really, in my opinion, the one that needs to be identified within our audience of, do you have that or not?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I just want to add one more slide to it that actually translates really well to the customer experience piece of the growth of AI. But, if we're not looking at, and if you're not looking at the qualification of the leads that are coming through your door and you're purely relying on quantitative data, that's a huge missed opportunity for us to understand what are we driving, where are those categories, what are the types of leads that are coming through that door. And so really wanting to call out those of us that have access to Loop Analytics. And if you aren't familiar with that platform, please consult with your team on what that is, specifically and especially on our lead gen clients. This is going to be huge for us to understand how that business is doing and where those opportunities lie. And so it's not meant to be a shameless plug, but knowing that we are very sensitive towards our marketing budgets and want to continue to be more efficient as it relates to where we spend and what we generate, really wanted to call that out as a huge opportunity for us from a quality and a qualitative standpoint going into 2025.
All right. Now, rounding out today's conversation, we're going to talk about AI. We did some research and found a bunch of data points and reports, and this was really interesting. I thought, what were the positive outcomes that you have seen from generative AI adoption? Efficiency and customer experience lead the pack. So efficiency could be, hey, we're able to write product descriptions 10 times faster than we did before, or we're able to incorporate our return processing center to be augmented with AI and our chatbot to reduce people associated to that task. It's going to be different for each business, but I thought it was interesting that org process efficiency and customer experience were top of the list. And then if we continue on, how AI is being used, and in our research, we saw data from 23 and 24, and it was interesting, like the variance here. So in 23, we had chatbots, coding, design, and content leading the way. You can see all of these data points have kind of almost doubled. Now, coding has gone from 31% of respondents to 65% of respondents. Content generation has gone from 30 to 58. So it's kind of reinforcing that adoption that we're seeing within our customers within these areas. I'm not going to go through details of all of these subsets, but really the takeaway is there's use cases in the front end and the back end. And it's just a matter of each business kind of identifying where within their business processes is there a way to make it either automated or augmented with a large language model to improve it. So, Jordan, any thoughts?
I think the biggest thing here, though, is I know a lot of us on this call are excited to hear content generation as a way to improve efficiency. Just some big considerations here, and making sure that, again, it's human reviewed and that we are really still delivering that valuable content, that unique content. It really leans into that expertise and experience of the business that's putting it together. So there are considerations on, of course, how we adopt and how we bring this into play. But it's interesting because this year, or I believe end of last year, like Google has openly said, like, it doesn't matter how the content is created as long as it is helpful, valuable, and unique content for that audience. So really exciting to see that growth in our industry over the next, and seeing it really continue to grow over the next year and coming years.
And then AI concerns. So there obviously is aspects to AI that are worrisome for a corporate boardroom. And we thought it would be important to give some visibility into both CMOs, VPs and EVPs and team leaders. Like, what did they view as the greatest concerns regarding AI? I think to no one's surprise, data exposure and leakage is the biggest issue. Now, this gets, in my opinion, to some degree rectified by having a private platform, right, where you can maybe do it on Google Cloud, install your own model on that, and really the risks go down. But I'm not going to go through all of these again. You can see some of the concerns by levels of seniority for generative AI in the marketing suite. All right, so we're almost at time. We're going to wrap it up with our core takeaways and open it up for some questions. So the core takeaways today, number one, leverage your current website traffic and elevate their experience. That means using testing, using optimization methods to make it a better experience, incorporating automation and all those things we discussed to get more juice from the traffic that you're driving to your site. The second piece is utilizing, like Jordan said, the be smart content to target the keywords that are going to get you the highest level of commercial intent, making sure you're putting in all of those facets into your queries, both in paid and organic, so that you're going to drive, again, the higher intent customer, which is going to move the bottom line. Personalization, we talked about that, targeting unique cohorts and associating that to your customer journeys. That should definitely be part of your planning process going in the new year. I would say, in front of a whiteboard, what are our segments? How can we speak to them differently? And what are the trigger events that would cause us to speak to them differently? How can we identify them? And then lastly is elevating your marketing maturity and looking at opportunities in AI and social media. Both maybe are not top of mind for the B2B customer, but both should be at least examined at a high level as a way to further drive value in your business. Jordan, any final thoughts before we go to Q&A?
No, I think you did a great job wrapping it up.
All right.
But Jeff, didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I think I cut you off first, but I appreciate that. So we do have a couple questions, and they're great ones to kind of round it off. So first, how would we recommend getting different ideas for content creation? This person specifically works within metal forming, so it can become difficult to come up with that unique, helpful content. So how would you think about that? Maybe Jordan's best for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, and again, I'm going to lean into that lead qualification and lead capture platform. I think that's going to be a great treasure trove of opportunity from a content generation standpoint. Other areas, again, it's interesting, like the videos and the articles there, like understanding what those segments are, understanding what they're asking, again, could be really great content expansion opportunities. For us, though, on the metal forming side, like leaning into all of the grades, all the different variations, those different types, the different requirements that are there, making sure that if someone searches with those modifiers that we see in those leads continuing to come in, like we are present for those. And so there tends to be so many opportunities for us that we don't often have to deviate from our strategies or from our initial recommendations there. But, Google looks at a site as a whole as well. So the more content that you create, again, it's going to help elevate and expand the depth of your site, and really help you be seen and positioned as the ultimate leader in the metal forming industry. And so while we do tend to lean into the intent-based content, is there opportunity for more informational, answering those questions, leaning into video production and creation? 100, yes, like most definitely.
Great. And then we'll end on this question, which is going to sound a little self-serving because it kind of is, but I promise it wasn't a seed question. A lot of the things we talk about with like SEO and CX, customer experience and all that is really a little bit more of a long game. And especially the C-suite, especially CFOs, can often be a little bit more short game focused. And so how do you align, or how do you kind of pitch these ideas up the ladder to the C-suite in a way that helps connect the dots to the outcomes that can be created, but also, get buy-in to do it today, even though it may take some time to actually see the results?
I would say looking at from the lens of both short-term velocity improvement to customer acquisition, both from a return on ad spend metric, like if we make our customer experience better, it's going to drive a higher conversion rate on both that initial session on a B2C client or in a B2B client. We get them to opt in and nurture them for that 3-month period at that point. On the longer game, LTV is where I would focus. Look at your lifetime value of your customer. And are they spending more? Are they interacting with your brand more? When you have touch points that are more frequent throughout the year that are tailored to their problems and their segments that they're looking for help in. The last thing you want to do is have a customer and not speak to them for 4 months. It's definitely a practice I would avoid. And I think some of the topics and themes that we went through today would kind of help that generating lifetime value in the longer term. Now, that comes into play. You got to have a good measurement system in place, be able to see your average spend per customer, how they're trending, and also in the front half, like how your marketing dollars are translating into that customer generation.
I mean, also leveraging like paid search as it relates, if you're trying to test user experience in general and SEO, like getting in that landscape as soon as it's available, like by turning on those campaigns, can be a huge opportunity to help prove the value in those tests and drive the right traffic there. So I'd even add that too. I know it wasn't a topic of that question, but there are other channels out there that can help drive the success and help convey the value of both of those programs and initiatives.
Well, great. Well, we're a minute over time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Appreciate everyone for the questions and participation. Hopefully you found some value today. I certainly did, just sitting in and listening to you too. So appreciate everyone. Like we said, we'll send out the video and recording and the slides as well, so you all have it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.